Okay, so we are recording. I'll try this. Hi y'all, I'm Maya with People First Bellingham, and we're here today to talk a little bit about initiative number 4. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Aline. I use she, her pronouns. And you might know me from the Whatcom Peace and Justice Center. I worked since 2019 as the executive director, and I have been organizing in town for a while before then. It was after, coming in touch with a lot of hardworking, really cool people on the ground that are doing the work and are interested in systemic material change that I found that the center was the place for me, and I want to talk a little bit more about that today.
I'm Nicole Torres. I teach at Western Washington University. I'm a faculty member there, but I also am a small business owner. I have a private practice here in the Fairhaven area. And I've actually held various roles in nonprofits throughout the years, especially the last couple of years. I actually relocated here to work at a nonprofit. So I kind of have quite a bit of experience kind of understanding how nonprofits and communities work together.
Cool. So part of the reason that we thought it would be great to talk with both of you about the People First initiative number 4 and the others is because of that analysis that you can bring. And so one of the things that we've seen around the opposition to initiative 4, which is an initiative that provides greater protections for workers. It does give workers a fair scheduling and advance notice expectation from employers, and it also institutes hazard pay in states of emergency. And there's been some opposition from nonprofits in the community, and so I'm wondering if y'all can talk a little bit about that and bring a little bit of a different framework for us to think about that.
Sure, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'm happy to have you start so I can
Cool, sounds good. I think the first point is that, first of all, it is a myth that it's primarily nonprofits and small businesses that are opposing initiative number 4. If you look at the list of funders for that, we all know that I think only 3% of the funds of hundreds of thousands of dollars come from local businesses. The majority of that fund comes from outside, from people who have interest in maintaining work precarity. And it was really interesting because it wasn't until maybe a week or two ago that I started being questioned on how will this affect nonprofits in town. And I was like, it will improve working conditions for nonprofit workers who are clearly burnt out. And, trust me, I get it. Like managing a small organization with so fewer funds than like a lot of these like big agencies have is a challenge, working with people who have working other schedules, who have children, who are there to do the work, and finding ways to allow for everyone to contribute without feeling burnt out is a challenge, and it's one that we take on when we work in nonprofits. But what I think is problematic is the normalization of the sacrificial mentality that like in order to do good work you have to be suffering, you have to be in this martyrdom white savior like position of just being completely overworked, underpaid, and you're doing that for the mission. I think if you're really up to do the mission of social justice and organizing work, then you gotta be able to materially pay your workers decent wages, especially in the middle of a global catastrophe, right? In the state of emergency. And you gotta be able to give them enough heads up for their schedule so that they can plan their lives, have childcare, have elder care. There's a number, Nicole and I were talking about this before, right? There's a number of people that have 2 jobs because with one job in a nonprofit, they can't pay their bills. It's completely normal. It's been a reality even for ADs at the center. But if you don't have a schedule that is secured ahead of time, you won't be able to fulfill your obligations. If you're not paid adequately, you won't be able to give your best. And I think that that's like one of the main points, and I'll let Nicole, who we met actually in a nonprofit management class that she was teaching and invited me to speak. about like the perspective, especially from like mental health systems, like how can we, all of these people like have these DEI statements, and then when it comes to materially organizing conditions for their workers to be successful in their roles, to actually serve our community in the right way, like not follow through with that.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you brought up the issue of sacrifice too, because I've been thinking about this for a really long time. One of the things that's been really important to me to really think about is what are we asking, the quote unquote frontline worker to do? We're asking them to sacrifice their health within the context of a pandemic, and also expect them to work under extraordinarily difficult conditions without giving them the proper compensation that they really need in order to keep going. And nonprofit workers in general, are fantastically underpaid. I think this is what you were alluding to earlier about the fact that people are, burnt out. There's this constant discussion of, if you're in the nonprofit world, not feeling guilty about taking time off, feeling guilty about calling in sick. All of those things are related for me as a clinician who's in private practice. I hear about these things all the time. So, and again, I also hear we're supposed to, people understand that they are basically supposed to be sacrificing themselves without getting the compensation from the surrounding community that they so desperately need in order to just keep going. So if we're expecting people to sacrifice themselves, why aren't we doing the same on behalf of other people? And to me, all of these initiatives are completely related. They're about healthy communities. And what I see in my private practice and in my role as an assistant professor, I see that what we need to be building is not necessarily more business mindset, a more business-oriented mindset that's about the bottom line, but it's about how do we actually cultivate a really meaningful, connected, and interrelated community so that we all can thrive. And that's just one of the ways in which it's not about the bottom line. It's about how do we get people off of the streets? How do we actually make sure they get what they need in order to have thriving businesses and have thriving communities? And perhaps if we take care of these other issues, like the extraordinary problem with rentals in the Bellingham area, if we take care of the fact that people do need hazard pay and actually just need a fundamental raise in general, that it's not just simply it will be bad for nonprofits. That's actually, I don't think that's true. I actually think it will transform the nature of nonprofits so that they're not actually constantly working under the gun, so to speak, burnt out at both ends, and actually the people who they're serving might actually be able to be better served, to be in a healthier state, which actually lifts the entire community. So it's less about it's going to be bad for business. It's more about how will it actually transform nonprofits overall if we actually pass these initiatives. So I was really glad to see them on the ballot. I'm like, when I read that, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I get all these, the big flyers that say, this initiative will be bad for businesses. And when I read it, I was like, actually, it'll be good for businesses. What is this? What's going on here? So,
yeah. And I mean, if you, I guess it'd be interesting to hear your response to, and we're already at 10 minutes here, so I just want to give us a sense of that. I'm wondering, if we can speak specifically to that framework of, is it the responsibility of workers to kind of bear the burden of whether or not a nonprofit can implement services? Is that
yeah? Can you? I'm sorry.
is that on the backs of workers? Is it their responsibility, to ensure that services are provided, or is that?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
A little misplaced there, because I think one of the claims that we're seeing is that if we pay workers better, we can't provide services.
Right.
If we offer hazard pay, we're all just gonna go down.
I think I want to be clear here that you can't say that you care for people without caring for people, right? Like, you can't say that you want to care systematically about helping the people in our town if you're not going to care in the individual level about the people who are working for your organization. And I want to say how transformative and incredible it is, the experience to work with people in my board who actually care for my well-being. I haven't experienced that before, and I don't know how many people have, because I think that the individualistic, like, scarcity brain that has always existed in the capitalistic world, like, infiltrated our nonprofits in a way that, like, doesn't allow for us to do our best job, doesn't allow for us to actually care for the health and well-being of our community in the way that we're meant to be. And, like, I want to be clear also that, like, this is not an attack on nonprofits. There's so many people in the ground doing an incredible work, and work that honestly, like, should be in our governance.
Right.
We know how much money there is in this town. We know the amount of, like, wealth disparity that there is in this town and in this country. The problem is that our priorities are in the wrong place. While we're funding militarized technocrat solutions, we're not actually funding workers' rights. We're not actually funding, a model of governance that serves the people.
Right.
And promotes better pay for better health, right?
And that, like, this is historic in the US, right? Like, in the Reagan era, you defunded all of your social programs. And I'm speaking as someone who comes from a country that is poor, right? Like, we struggle. And we have our own problems with white supremacy, capitalism, all of the above, patriarchy, you name it. But we have one of the largest, like, healthcare systems in the world, right? Like, completely for free. Ty, my partner, came to Brazil, and he got a flu, and we went to the hospital, and he got an injection, and and a consultation and whatnot. It took forever, but by the end of the day, he was like, I don't have to pay anything. No, you don't. And you know what? Like, the reason why people get homeless in this town is because they're all one medical bill away from that, and that includes nonprofit workers.
Exactly. It's so true. And people forget that nonprofits have a dual goal. Like, they have two things that they actually need to attend to. It's not only being financially solvent, it's actually, are you doing what you said you were going to do? And if you're actually too focused on chasing the money, then there's definitely the tendency to drift towards just simply being more business minded and less about taking care of the actual mission, which is really about taking care of people in social services and community mental health. And if a clinician, for example, one that I talked to who's no longer here, they said, look, they're not giving me hazard pay. I can't take time off. This is really stressing me out. And, there's plenty of data that says chronic stress actually compromises our immune systems, which actually, if you think about it, under a pandemic, come on, we really do need to think about, if you're stressed, if a person is stressed out, it compromises their immune system, which actually relates to how things might proliferate in these circumstances. So thinking about it in terms of the interrelated parts and the system is huge. So we do need to take care of people and think about the sacrifices that they're making.
And compensate them for being unsafe.
And yes, I mean, they're putting their lives on the line. And of course, we've talked about how this not just affects, everyone, it especially affects people who are disenfranchised, communities of color, which is related to so many of the historical patterns in the United States. I don't know if you saw, but there was a tribunal happening this week about whether or not BIPOC individuals in the United States have experienced genocide. I don't know what the outcome is around that, but these are historical trajectories that have been around for years that we keep trying to create technological solutions for. But what we really need to be doing is actually just simply building healthier communities and not always having outside experts come in and tell us how to run our communities, the places we live.
Right, which in this case, I guess we might posit that is these big corporate PACs coming in and saying you shouldn't be paying hazard pay to workers.
Which ultimately, I just want to remind that we are the experts of our experiences, right? Workers, nonprofit workers, social workers, BIPOC folks, like we are the experts of our own reality. And I think we need to stop believing that condescending message that just because we stutter, just because we have an accent, just because we are workers and we're working class and we're poor, we deserve poor working conditions. I think it's, like I keep coming back to that quote from Paulo Freire that in oppressive, when you don't have a liberating educational system, the dream of the oppressed is to become the oppressor, and like we internalize that message so much. We internalize that in order to like get away from exploitation, we need to exploit others, and I think we see that reproduced in non-profit systems. And there are non-for-profit corporations, so I want to remind us of that. Like there is that entrepreneurial like, oh, we're creating profitable solutions, but like we're non-for-profit, right? And that is not to say that like that there isn't really good work being done. That is to say that we need to rethink the logic by which we're operating, and if we're operating out of a place of like modeling a different reality and believing in it and practicing it, that's when we know we're doing the right thing. If we're operating out of a place of like scarcity and thinking that like we need to save the people, look down upon them, and like just reproduce that like capitalistic logic, we are going to fail. We're going to fail as a community. We're going to fail as a society. Maybe we're going to have a few people in quote unquote leadership recognizable places, but we're still going to be failing our community in actually enacting change. And I think that that's the bottom line, right? There was a really good article that came out on the Emerald South Seattle called "I Won't Be Quiet About Nonprofit Harm." And I think it kind of systematizes a little bit of what we're talking about today, and how underpaid nonprofit environments or undercompensated spaces that are also called nonprofits can really, really harm an individual. And instead of like harnessing all their talents for improving a community, make them burn out and completely step away from roles of social services and whatnot. So I think that's
I think that brings us kind of full circle, because in that way it really shows you the extra harm that is done when your rejection of hazard pay for your nonprofit workers is just yet another thing that's piled on top, right? It's just another aspect of that harm to not compensate for that level of not feeling safe, of like you pointed to, Nicole, of having to work overtime and extra hours and not being compensated for any of that. Right.
And I mean, and this goes to the issue around unions too. I mean, for example, I'm actually, the faculty at Western are unionized, and it's wonderful. Why is it wonderful? Because having a unionized position where people are advocating for better wages and better pay have actually allowed me to actually decrease my rates as a person in private practice. Like, I can afford to give people a lower cost for something that they so desperately need, which is therapy, particularly within the context of this pandemic. I still get people asking whether or not I'm accepting clients, and there's such a dearth There's such a vacuum of therapists right now, and affordable therapists, so that's part of my contribution to creating a healthy community where I can offer lower rates in my private practice so that people can get what they need. I mean, so this is like the relationship, the ecological relationship between unions, between, advocating for hazard pay, between mental health, social services, between housing. So all of these things, it's far too siloed. And we really need to think about things in ecological terms and understand that we're implicated in actually helping out our neighbors.
Well, I feel like that kind of says it all. Are there any kind of last things you want to add to this when you kind of think about the community response to number 4 and the rest?
Yeah, I think we're living in a crisis of creativity and imagination and possibility. There's so much that these initiatives, all of them, bring about. And it saddens me to see people not believing that they deserve better, not believing that we can do better, that we can advocate for. That's why nonprofits were included in the governmental programs that are supporting, like the PPP loan, that are supporting people in paying and maintaining jobs. It is because they are a large part of our employment here in Washington State. And if we don't set up the example of how to actually treat our workers right, who will? This is an attempt to, conquer, whoops, there's the truck, hearts as well as mine. So I just want to invite everyone to really read all of the initiatives. Don't just believe what you heard. Take a look at them. Read for yourself. There's a really good cartoon that says, it's so sad to not know how to read. You have to end up believing what other people tell you. And I just want to tell you, don't believe what other people are telling you. Don't even believe just what I'm telling you. Just go ahead and read the initiatives and think about what would it look like to have a policy in place that will actually change the concrete structures of our governance models and our pay structures for the people and by the people. I think that that's a really transformative opportunity that we need to seize now.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the real question, for me, the question is, I agree. It's like a poverty of imagination around this, and also, envision a better community. Basically, the role of the nonprofit is not to create more need. It's not to just constantly be in service to others. It's actually about how do we transform our communities? How do we actually create healthier spaces for everyone to live? So this is not about us versus them.
There was a lot of truck noise in the background, and
right.
So we've moved. That's why there's a different setting here. Sort of final analysis is on this, or what you want to say to voters or workers who might not be sure what this means for their nonprofit.
My big thing is, from what I've seen in this community, I consider it a health issue. As a cultural anthropologist, as a clinician, a social worker, like all of these things are related. This is about creating healthier communities. So if the initiative itself is people first, it's very clear to me that it's about not primarily centering business interests and really thinking about the people, the healthy communities, and how this relates to the overall health of the city. So if you think about it in terms of health, we're actually trying to address all of those things in these initiatives that will actually stimulate economies locally, that will actually give people the incentive and desire to actually want to go to work, to actually want to participate, to actually feel like they're just not simply sacrificing themselves to people who don't want to make a sacrifice on behalf of them to help everyone. So to me, this is a health issue. It's about investing in other people. It's about neighborliness. It's about really participating civically in a way that goes beyond the rhetoric and actually putting things into action.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Thanks so much for doing this video for People First today.
Thank you for asking.
I will try to put myself in it. I don't know if this will work, but thank you so much. And remember, everybody, to vote. The deadline for dropping out of Dropbox is 8 p.m. On the 2nd. And you can drop it anytime, and I might make a little video about how to vote and opening the ballot and showing you around. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.